All right, man. Okay, so I think a good place to start would be your Twitter handle. Do you want to tell us the story of how you get your Twitter handle at Tynan?
Yeah, so I forget what it was before, probably Tynan.com or something like that. And then around that time, I got Tynan.com. Oh, yeah, I guess that's what it was. Sorry. So I got Tynan.com. And I thought, if I can get Tynan.com, it shouldn't be that hard to get the Tynan Twitter handle. And I had looked for years, and some guy had it and just never used it. Maybe it had been idle for 5, 6 years. And so I emailed Twitter. I tried all these different things, couldn't get anyone's attention. So I forget where I got this idea, but I ordered a custom made cake where each cake was like a letter, so it spelled out Twitter. So it was this enormous, cake. I needed 3 people to carry it. And we just walked to the Twitter offices because I was in San Francisco at the time. And I think the people in front just sort of thought I was a delivery person or something. So they were like, "Oh, okay, yeah, go ahead, go in there." And so I set up this huge Twitter cake. And then I'm like, "Hey, actually, the reason I brought this is because I really want my handle. Here it is." And they were like, "Oh, okay." And they kind of found someone for me, and they're like, "All right, no guarantees, but maybe he can help you. Write down what you want." And yeah, the next day I had it, and I made a video about it, and they were pretty pissed. I guess they didn't really notice that I was videoing it, so I had to. I think I took down the video, maybe.
Oh my God. Okay, so all these questions pop up as you come say the story, right? So first of all is like how did the idea came about to get the cake, and I guess like do you just have so much time on hand?
Yeah, I have a lot of time for sure. Uh, I guess I'm very stubborn. When I have this idea that I'm going to do something, I will I'll think really outside the box, try to figure out some way to get it done. And I really don't remember where the cake idea came from, but I guess I thought like, who's going to turn down a cake that has their business's name on it? Like it just, at least I'm going to get in the door with it. And I figured from there I could probably figure it out. But if it didn't work, who knows? I would have tried something else probably.
I think I want to touch a little bit on this monthly email that you send out to I don't know whether it's your family or is it close friend or they're separate emails or they are together. How did the idea came about, and how does it look like? I mean, just sort of like top level.
Sure, yeah. So it started because uh, I have a site called cruisesheet.com. That's kind of like the main thing I work on. And I have a few friends who are really into it. And so like they'd always ask me how it was going, what's going on. And I thought, well, I'll just send them a monthly email with what I did that month and, kind of keep myself accountable as well. So I started doing that. And then my favorite thing about it was that by having it at a regular interval, it made me more aware of the time that stuff took. I'd say like, oh, actually, I got a lot done this month, or I felt productive, but I can read my last update that not that much has happened since then. So I thought it would be useful to have it, as a more general life sort of email. And so I just took a few people from that list. I think there's only 4 of us, and every month we write this monthly email.
And what does that monthly email entails?
So it's different for each of us has sort of a different format. For me, I write how was work, how was my marriage, how were my friends, how was my family, uh, and I think I just have like a miscellaneous section at the bottom with like stuff I'm excited about or something like that. So a lot of times, maybe it'd be short. It'd be like, hey, I saw this many family members this month or something, and here they are. But just sort of things that I think are positives in my life. So if I'm aware of them every month, then maybe I'll do a little bit more of them or notice when they're starting to do worse.
Probably like an hour or two of your time, right? Like why? Like after running the cruise sheet, I mean, I guess you're still running it. What's the value of the continuing doing the email for you?
Yeah, I just think that sometimes, especially when I'm working a lot, I don't really, I forget to take a higher level view of like not just how'd this task go or how's this little project going, but like how'd my month go? Especially now I'm not traveling, obviously, but before coronavirus, I would travel. I think last year I averaged a flight every 3.5 days, so I'm like constantly moving, and that really makes it hard for me to keep track of time. Like sometimes people will say something, oh, remember last month we did this, and I think, oh, that feels like 6 months ago. So it helps me keep regular track of time, what I'm doing with that time, and making sure I'm keeping up with stuff that's important.
And I guess one of the things that you still put on your Twitter handle is that you are a ex-professional pickup artist, probably a instructor as well. Um, how did you became? What's the story behind that?
It's a really long story, so I'll tell you the shorter version. I can expand if you want, but the gist of it was that I was really bad with girls, but also just socialization in general. I would say, all the way through college. So, if I had some close friends, they were all nerds like me, and we could communicate, we got along well, and that was fine. But like talking to strangers, even like a friend of a friend, let alone like a female friend of a friend, was just somewhere where I felt very uncomfortable. I had no idea what to do. You know, if I was in a group of strangers, even just a few of us chatting, maybe my face would turn red. I'd be really embarrassed. And so, I had a girlfriend in high school that I sort of got just through sheer luck and her own proactivity. Uh, and then there was this other girl in high school, right by the end of high school, who I had this massive crush on her, and I was too oblivious to realize that she also had a crush on me. So we're hanging out almost every day. Senior year summer, she would come pick me up in her car. We'd go around Austin, where I used to live, and it just never occurred to me that she liked me. I just thought like, oh, this person I'm hanging out with every day. I wish she liked me. And sort of the last day, or one of the last days of summer vacation, we finally kissed, and it was 100% because of her. And I thought, well, great, we've kissed. Now we're going to start dating. We'll probably get married. Like, this is how these things go. This is perfect. And the very next day, she went to college off in Chicago, very far from Austin. But I saw that more as a speed bump than a roadblock. So I said, oh, okay, well, that's fine. I'm sure over vacation, we'll kind of rekindle things. And, college only lasts 4 years, all this sort of stuff. And then through a series of events, it became very clear that, well, it's probably very clear to everybody else, but increasingly clear to me that it was not going to happen. Like, she started dating, she had a boyfriend, she moved in with him, she got engaged. And sort of around the point where she got engaged, I thought, oh, I haven't really talked to this girl in years. She's engaged. Maybe this isn't going to happen. And
Oh,
yeah, I mean, I was really that oblivious. It's not an exaggeration. And around that time, or for the years preceding that, I was also a professional gambler. So I was in all these online forums for our internet gambling. And there's this one guy who had showed me this site about how to pick up girls. And of course, I had no interest because I was so obsessed with this girl. And right about this time when I realized, like, hey, this isn't going to happen, I thought, what's that site? Well, I can't remember what it's called. And I was like searching all the things, and I found it. It was called fastseduction.com. And being a nerd and being on the internet, I just read all of it. I mean, I was up till like 4 or 5 in the morning reading everything. And it never occurred to me, I was just like kind of naive in general, but it never occurred to me that people exaggerate or lie online. I just sort of assumed everything these people were saying were true. So people would say things like, hey, I'm this big nerd. I went to this club. There was this model. I talked to her. Now she's my girlfriend. And I would think, well, that's great. I didn't know that was possible. And so I just sort of took it at face value, and I started reading all this stuff. But I think most importantly, it made me realize that social skills, in particular dating or pickup, it was just a set of skills that I didn't have. Before that, I'd always thought that it was something you were born into. And I just knew that I wasn't good. And I was like, well, I guess, I'm not tall. I'm not good with women. Two things I can't change. And so this changed my perception on it. And so I went really deep into it. I ended up joining this group in Austin of just these like 10 guys who were kind of similar to me, like nerdy guys who were just a little further on that path. And it just sort of through this bizarre set of coincidences, I met and befriended the best pickup artists in the world, these guys from a company called Real Social Dynamics. At the time, they were working with Mystery to get this house called Project Hollywood. It was Dean Martin's old mansion.
can we sprinkle in a little bit of the Tyler's story in that? Because I read some of your blog posts and it just sounds like, what is this even possible?
Yeah, so Tyler, his real name's Owen Cook. He went by Tyler Durden from Fight Club, and he was a guy who I could relate to because he was, also a pretty average looking guy like I am, and very nerdy, and just his method of communication really resonated with me. And he was in it to like learn it, to like understand what was actually going on, whereas other people were maybe more of like, here's a pickup line, or it seemed a little more cheesy to me. So I really liked his stuff. And so I sort of ended up going to Chicago because I was on the precipice where I knew that if I got into this, I was going to get kind of ridiculously hardcore about it. And I was like, I need to know if this is real. Tyler is the person that I connect with the most. He didn't know me, but I liked his stuff. So I said, I've got to go meet him.
Cool. Yeah, and then I'm just gonna interject right here. If you could just share the story of the first night you hang out with Tyler and saw
Yeah.
him live in action.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I ended up going to Chicago to see him, and sort of through some misunderstandings, everybody sort of thought that I was friends with somebody else in Real Social Dynamics. So they all sort of accepted me as one of them. And I guess my social skills were at least not so terrible that I couldn't get along with random people if I was around them. So they invite me to go out with them that night. And of course, I have no intention of even talking to a woman because I'm so scared, but I wanted to see them. And I still remember exactly what it looked like because it changed my view of life. But I remember seeing Tyler, and he sort of comes up to me because he knows that he's showing off, right? And he knows that he's sort of there to, like, there's a certain kind of game you do when you really want something solid, and then there's another way you go when you just want to impress people. So you sort of get big visible reactions, which is also kind of moving you in the same direction as something solid, but it's not as effective. So he knew what mode he was in, and he was very, I probably learned this from him, so he's very aware of that. And so he goes, watch this. And there's this stunning girl, and she's with this like big muscular guy. Tyler's not muscular. No, he's shorter than this guy. And I can't hear what he's saying because they're sort of on the other side of this small club, and they're sitting on this like kind of like this double day bed sort of thing. So the guy and his girlfriend on this day bed, and Tyler just sort of like sits on the edge of it like this, sort of leans over and just starts saying something. And you can see that the couple is just very dismissive of him. They're like, yeah, yeah, okay. And he's like, turns around. He's like, actually, and he says something else, and you can't really see what he's doing. And just as this is going, you see the girl is starting to become more, her body language. She's starting to turn towards him. She's kind of sitting up so she can face him. And you can see that she's becoming more interested. And the guy is just becoming more perplexed because, like, clearly this guy is, Tyler's like below him on the dating, food chain. And he knows this. And his girlfriend is like showing interest, and he can't quite figure out like what's going on. So at first he's sort of like dismissive of Tyler. Then he's like concerned. And at some point, Tyler and the girl are lying down on this daybed, sort of like leaned in, talking to each other. And I just remember the guy had like moved to a piano bench kind of thing. And he's talking to a random stranger he doesn't know. And you could just sort of tell he's like, look, this guy thinks he's picking up my girlfriend. And, the girl had given him his number. She said, like, oh, come to my hotel room or something like that. So, yeah, it blew my mind. It made me, I thought, if he can do it, I can do it.
Okay, wait. So now that you know what's behind the scenes, if you were then Tyler, what do you think he saying? And for that to happen, because it just sound. I mean, even now you tell me, and you saw it firsthand, right? It still sound kind of crazy to me.
It sounds crazy to me. And to be fair, like, Tyler is one of the best of the best. So, like, he can do stuff that normal humans can't do. Mystery is another one of those people that can do stuff like that. But it's not so much what he said that matters. It almost never is in pickup. It's usually what's going on under the surface. And in some ways, it's actually easier when a guy is there, because if a guy is there, you just have to be better than him. If there's no other guy, you have to be better than any potential guy she can imagine. Obviously, there's logistical challenges. There's pros and cons to it. But especially if you're just trying to impress people, uh, it's almost easier because you you sort of befriend the guy in a way that he can't forcibly eject you, right? So you just sort of chat with him more than the girl, right? And then it's like, well, there's sort of this cognitive dissonance where it's like, well, he's maybe not really trying to pick up my girlfriend because he's mostly talking to me. He's kind of ignoring her. He's being like a little bit what might look rude to her, but really it's teasing her, right? You can even sort of commiserate with the guy where you're like, oh my God, is she always like this? How do you live with her? Like little things like that, like a neg that make it seem like you're not trying to pick her up. Meanwhile, her interest is getting piqued. So there's a lot of stuff you can do.
That's interesting. I mean, so what you're saying is that you chat with the girl first, and then you go talk to the guy, nagging the girl, and then you go back talking to the girl.
So you talk to the group first. So you always, always, always talk to the group. Anytime you single one person out in a group, it's very weird for the rest of the group, right? Imagine if you and your friends are there and someone comes up and only starts talking to you, you feel very awkward, right? Because you've been removed from the group. But you would always want to engage the whole group. I mean, the start of a good pickup is making it so that everybody wants you there, or at least will tolerate you. But if everybody's thrilled that you're there, they're all going to make it easier for you.
So I think now that we're into deep with this pickup thing, what do you think is the sort of biggest misconception with picking up? And I guess why it also gets such a bad rap.
Yeah. I think some of the bad rep is deserved. I think especially these days, like I thought about removing it from my Twitter because I feel like the modern pickup artists sort of like give it a bad name. The way I was taught and the way I learned, not everybody goes in with the best intentions for sure, and there are some bad actors like there are in any field. But
Right, like sales and all that, right?
sure, but it was, what I learned, the fundamental thing I learned was that women want to be treated a certain way. They want to be communicated with us in a certain way. They want their like the courtship to go in a certain way where it's exciting for them. They feel comfortable, right? Sort of on that edge of like excitement, but still feel safe, right? They want to feel understood. They want to feel valued for something other than their beauty. They want to feel like they really know who you are. They want to know why you're not just like every other guy. So there are all these things that women want to happen, whether they know it or not, right? Just like I don't know how to design a perfect roller coaster, but if I go on a roller coaster, it's well designed. I'm gonna enjoy it, right? So it's similar sort of thing. And what pickup really is at its core, I think should be, is you understand the experience of a woman in dating, which is totally different than our experience, which I didn't realize at the time. You understand how women want to communicate and be communicated with. You understand which parts of you are sort of compatible with that already, which parts you want to change. Like maybe I wasn't a good listener, but I wanted to become one. Fair enough, right? And then you also learn ways in which you're probably not going to change, but you just minimize those, right? Minimize the impact. So I think people think it's about pickup lines and manipulation and lying. In my experience, it's actually sort of the opposite, where it's about understanding and sort of providing an experience that somebody wants. At the end of the day, if you're not compatible with somebody, you're not going to end up with them. But you can do certain things to maximize your chances of figuring out whether you're compatible or not. And you can work on yourself to make it so that you're more compatible with as many people as you'd be interested in as possible.
Got it. Maybe let's go back to Tyler a little bit. What do you think is Tyler's superpower?
Oh, I know what. I know what his superpower is. Yeah, Tyler's superpower. So a good example is when we all moved into this house. So I lived with him and a bunch of these other guys. One of us, probably him, had the idea that we should join a gym. There was this gym right across from the house. So we walked down to the gym, and I had never been in a gym before. I think probably most of us hadn't, but Tyler had like read some stuff or he knew a little bit. And I remember he was showing me how to do bicep curls. And so we're just doing these curls. And he's like, "Yeah, do it till failure." So I'm like, "Okay, good. Yep, did it." And I remember, I did, 10 of them or whatever, right? The final one, I'm like, "All right, that's it." Just like a normal person. And I remember he got to that point that I was at, and he was like his face was turning red. He's like spitting. He's like fighting these things to get all the way to the top, gets back down and does it again. Like he's a machine. So like maybe I would go out, I would have a bad night. I'd get rejected a few times. I'm like, I'm done. I'm out of here. Right. I'd go home. He would keep going. And like his night didn't stop at 2 a.m. when ours did. His stopped at 4 a.m. I remember there was another time where I'm sitting on the couch. He comes downstairs and he's all dressed up in his gear, his funny clothes and everything. And it's like 1:55 or 2 a.m. or something. He's like, "Hey man, you want to go out?" I was like, "It's 2. The bars are closed." He's like, "Yeah, but people are gonna be outside clubs. They're gonna go eat food. I mean, there's still people. Let's go." And I was like, "Ah, I'm all right." And he's like, he just looks at me like I'm an alien, and he says, "You came to this house. You're spending a lot of money to be here. Why wouldn't you just maximize every second of being here?" And I was like, and I kind of brushed him off. And then as he left and I was sitting there, I was like, "Yeah, what am I doing?" Like he's totally right. So he's like a very hardcore person.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's interesting. And like how does he still have the like to push through that?
I'm not really sure, but he and I we don't see each other very frequently anymore, so I'm not super in touch or anything like that. I think there's some sense of wanting to master it for the sake of mastering it. I don't think he cares about the results. I actually don't think he's cared about the results for a really, really long time. Um, so yeah, I think that he just really cares about mastery, that he sees that there's another level to get to. To be honest, and this is an outside perspective, I think it's to his detriment at this point. I actually think he's such a brilliant person and is so I think he could probably apply that to other fields and get further, but yeah, he's just going crazy.
Oh wow, that's interesting. And do you think that this idea of pickup, right? Once you know it, would it still work on you?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, because really what it is like I remember there were these fun. So when the game was coming out, it was this big deal because everybody knew it was coming out, and a lot of people were like terrified that it was going to totally ruin everything, right? And I didn't feel that way because I felt that it was like, okay, I've changed who I am. I'm a better person. I understand women. It's going to be fine. And I remember the first night it came out, we were out at a club in Austin, and this girl recognized what I was doing. And she said, "Oh, this is, you're doing this thing from the game." I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's so crazy. You know that. I'm actually in the game." And she's like, "No, you're not." And I'm like, "No, I really am. It's cool that you know about that, this whole thing." And she's like, "That would never work on me. That would never work on me." And I'm like, "Oh, and probably wouldn't. That's fine." And then, of course, by the end of the night, she's like, I wasn't that interested in her, but she's like, "Oh, take my phone number, call me, let's go out. Don't try that pickup stuff though; it won't work." So it's like, you know, yeah, I forget who it was. It was maybe Mystery would say it, or one of these guys would say it. They say attraction isn't a choice, right? It's like if you put, men tend to be more visually stimulated, right? So if I held up a picture of a really beautiful woman, chances are, and you're attracted to her, I can't say, "Hey, don't be attracted to her," and you're like, "Okay, yep, not attracted anymore." Maybe if you got to know her personality, you wouldn't be or something, but you can't intentionally turn it on or off. So
Wow. If it would still work, then the hard part would be, as the question would be, like, do you feel scared? Like if you were to go to a club with your girlfriend, with Tyler, say for example, or with your wife, sorry.
no. I think a lot of people should though. uh, because I think that many people have not really experienced like deep attraction or like uh, I think that the experience that like someone who's good at pickup can provide to a woman is like a really good experience. Like you just have a better understanding of what they want. Nobody's perfect. I'm sure my wife could tell you I mess up all the time, but on average, I think you provide a level of communication, of understanding, and all that that's very high. So I think if a girl is dating a guy, and you would see this a lot, going out, a girl would be dating a guy who's the best available option. Then she meets you, who's hopefully a lot better, and it's like, oh, this is a different world, right? It's like I thought I'd like living, on Mars, but here on Earth, things are amazing. You can breathe the air, So, uh, I yeah, I think that for people who really don't know what they're doing and aren't, creating a good relationship, I think maybe they could be a little worried.
What resources, practice, or things some people want to get good at? Not, I guess, pick up one, but more so like the broader thing, which is like understanding women and getting better at attraction and knowing the woman, female psyche. What do you recommend?
I think it's tough because I don't know that I've really seen anybody who's made like a material improvement in their life who hasn't been really hardcore and like spent a year doing nothing but pickup. So I think like you can get an academic understanding of it by reading books, but uh, yeah, I don't know. Like the people I've seen that really benefit a lot are people who are out doing it every day and then they read the right thing and that gets them next level, or they go to a workshop, or they just learn it themselves. I think it's almost dangerous to learn a little bit about it because that's when you have guys who think that negs are like insulting women and like they actually will make the results worse, but also know that they should be better. It's a really awkward position to be in. So yeah, I don't know that I recommend anything, to be honest. I wrote a book called Superhuman Social Skills, which is how to apply it to friendships and stuff like that. So, I mean, that was sort of my way of trying to make it accessible to people. Uh, if somebody wanted to take a program, I kind of feel like mystery is probably the right way to go. Um, but I also am not super aware of who's selling what and what's available. I haven't done pickup in so many years now that like I'm pretty removed from it.
Well, yeah, I mean, you got a wife now, so well, let's
Yeah.
well, we're going to talk about that next. That's interesting. So your I guess your 80/20 would be 1 year full on like go out and what? So maybe a mystery course. Anything else to stack on that?
So I'd say first of all, only do a year if you're really bad and you really need it. If you don't need it, it's such a hard thing to do. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. I think most guys who've gone through it would say that. And if you don't really need it, you're not really going to go the whole way through, and it's going to be kind of a waste of time. Like it's like one of these things like you're going through a tunnel. It's like, well, it's only really worth it if you make it to the other side. If you don't, you're just stuck in a tunnel. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe this isn't the most encouraging thing, but it's like I think if you just want to learn some of the skills that will be universally applicable, learn storytelling. I think that's like a good universal skill that will help with pickup, but also with other relationships. Um, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's a tough thing. I actually don't recommend that most people do it. Like if I have coaching clients and they want to do it, I often will tell them not to.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, I guess no one would hurt to learn active listening,
Right.
storytelling skills, and if you're half decent at getting some dates through your apps, then basically you're just recommending not to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, like, this isn't a very specific path, but I think the biggest thing to understand is that in general, women want to be communicated to differently than men do, especially in a dating context. Maybe not in a business context, but like in a dating context, they do. And I think most guys are not very socially aware. Obviously, there are some that are, but in general.
An example?
So, in a dating context, a woman typically will want to feel an emotional reaction, right? So she'll want to feel excited or she'll want to be taken on, if you're telling a story, it should be an emotional journey. That's part of why storytelling is so important. Uh, Often, if I meet a new guy at a party, I'm not trying to take him on an emotional journey. Probably we're trying to talk about facts, right? And that's probably what he wants. Even if a woman is approaching me, do I really want her to take me on an emotional journey? Not really. I kind of want to know what she's about. I want to connect. So I think just to be aware of if you speak with a woman and it doesn't go well, it's probably because you didn't really care about what she wanted to get out of that conversation or that interaction. You probably didn't think about it.
And if you would, let's say if you would meet me at a party, and then you want to bring me on, okay, let's say I sign up for an emotional journey with Tynan. How
Yeah.
would that look? How would that look like?
I'd say a lot of it's, if it's with a woman, right? What you want is this is the point of a neg, right? Everybody thinks a neg is this big insult. It's really not. It's a little thing you say early on to sort of at least blur the line between are you interested in this woman romantically or just as a friend? Because a typical guy who's interested in a woman he'd be like, "Oh, you're so beautiful. Can I buy you a drink? Wow, I haven't seen anyone as beautiful as you before." Something like that. Immediately he's in a category and her default reaction is to shut him down, right? Whereas if you say like something like, "Oh, you got a little piece of lint on your shirt," and you pull it off, immediately she's like, "Oh," like it's not like, "Oh, he thinks I'm ugly," or like, "Oh, my pride is hurt." It's like, "Oh, he isn't viewing me as a sexual object." Right? He's viewing me as a normal person on the same level as him, not on a
It's like how
pedestal.
you tease your friends.
I'd say similar, right? Like like if you're hanging out with your guy friends, you're probably making fun of them actually probably a lot more than that, right? Or at least like banter, like guy banter. So so basically you do that, and then the woman's like, "Oh, okay, maybe he's not really that interested in me," right? And then you want to make her interested in you, so you start telling stories that maybe show why you're different than other guys. So her interest is piqued. Now she's like, "Oh, okay, we started with nothing. Now I'm kind of interested in this guy, but I still don't really know if he's interested in me or not." Then you get to know her. And then it's like, "Oh, he isn't." And then you explain to her, not here's a list, but like you acknowledge what it is about her besides her beauty that you're interested in. Like, "Wow, that's so cool that you did this, this, this. I've always been interested in that. I've never met someone who does it." Right? So that's this journey where you've gone from strangers and now you're both interested in each other and you're sort of on the same level that's high up.
Let me just, I guess, bring us out a little bit on this or pick up context. It's just also, even if you meet a friend, and this is what I learned from this lady, Vanessa Van Edwards, which basically took research paper and convert them into actionable advice, which is one of the things she taught is that, look, if you're talking to a person like me talking to you, if I say, hey, me and you, we do solo traveling, well, that's a uncommon trait that is common between both of us. And it's sort of, and what we want, and when there's a lot of this thing, is that you want to pull a lot of connections, and the most uncommon one, the better it is, and that will sort of create the bond and a reason why probably you will want to meet up again later in the future.
For sure. Yep. 100%. Let's do it.
Yeah, how did it came about? Well, here we are. Like, you are the best pickup artist in the world. Hopefully, can attract any woman and going out all the time. And then why need a wife quest? I guess.
Yeah. So one of the big failings of pickup for me, or myself, failings of myself within pickup, was that to really do it, you have to go to bars and clubs because that's the only place where you can really see enough people to kind of keep active in it. And I had this realization that, as many bars and clubs I've been to, I'd never met anybody there who I was interested in long term. Whether or not they were even interested in me, I just hadn't met anyone where I thought I'd be interested in them. And so, when I had that realization, I sort of thought, okay, I've gotten what I want to get out of pickup. I'm sort of done with it. It's not going to be like, it's changed me in really good ways that'll carry me forward, but I don't necessarily need to like identify as being a pickup artist and go through all that anymore. So, I had normal relationships and stuff like that. And then I was in this sort of period of time where I was trying to work hard and also trying to date and sort of realizing that I wasn't going to be able to do both to the standard that I wanted to do them at the same time. I was working really hard and I felt like that was my number one priority. And I felt like even if I met somebody great, I wasn't really going to have the time. I wouldn't be willing to cut away the time to build that kind of relationship that could end up in marriage. So I made a deal with myself, which was like zero dating for 3 years. And after that, Wife Quest 9000 begins, where I'm going to like make that my top priority, not in like a creepy way, like, hey, you want to be my wife, but like, basically like not go on dates with people. As soon as someone's disqualified from being wifey, don't date them anymore, even if it's, even if I like them, and just be real active on it. So, yeah, so that's what I did.
Wow. Okay, so how do you come up with the criteria, I guess, in the first place?
So I think I learned about it a lot through just regular dating, where for a good example is I don't drink and almost none of my friends drink. And I definitely always knew I'd prefer somebody who didn't drink, as a girlfriend. So I would try to only date girls who didn't drink. Obviously that decreases your dating pool by like 99% and probably 99.9% if you're out in clubs, right? And so then I thought, okay, well, let me be more reasonable. I'll date people who drink. And so I had a girlfriend who drank. And as we were dating, I was like, she's great. It's a fine choice for her. I don't want to end up with somebody who drinks. And now I know that. So like that was one of my criteria. So I had a few criteria that are just like sort of set in stone. And I sort of knew what they were going into Wife Quest. I also read like I was getting a little antsy by the end of my 3 years of no dating. So I was reading like so many relationship books and parenting books and all this to try to like, kind of have my head in the right mindset.
What other things that you put rather than no dating? Sorry, no drinking. What are other things on the list?
So I think I'm trying to think. I used to like really be able to rattle them off. Now it's been years, but yeah, no drinking, happy/positive attitude. Somebody who's like focused on growth. Doesn't have to be in like a weird like self-helpy sort of way, but like if they come across some sort of obstacle, they're going to try to overcome it and maybe change themselves for it, something like that. And then good communication. I think probably I had more, but like those were sort of the gist of what I was looking for.
How do you end up with this whole idea of marriage? Because I think that's the pretty much the opposite antithesis of what a pickup artist, I guess the image of a pickup artist is, right? It's like, oh, I'm never gonna settle.
I don't think it is the opposite. I think if you look, most of the people who were in, especially in my like generation of pickup artists, most of them are married or in serious relationships, have kids, stuff like that. I think especially because those people tend to sort of fade out of the spotlight. So one of the other guys who lived in the house actually now lives right near me in Vegas, and he's married and has a beautiful kid and all this. So like, it depends. A lot of people got into it for a lot of different reasons. I think really most of the people that I knew who were into it and were serious about it got into it because they wanted to end up, if not married, like in a long-term relationship with somebody great, and felt like they couldn't do it without that skill. Obviously, there were people who just want to sleep with as many people as possible, and you, especially on workshops, you get people like that once in a while. But I don't think it's the opposite at all.
That's fair. I think it's just the sort of the societal image of how it
Yeah.
makes us think.
Right. Or some people really have a lifestyle of it, and they like it as a hobby, like Tyler or whatever. So, uh, but I think I think my wife doesn't really like it. Like she's like, oh, I'm glad I didn't meet you back then. She doesn't like to hear the stories from back then. But at the same time, she doesn't. I don't think she understands who I would have been without it. And for sure, like even if she thinks we would still have found each other or been dating, I don't know if she does. Without it, I know we would not have. I wouldn't have had the confidence to talk to her. So, I think it's a natural extension.
Yeah. And I guess like coming back to your wife a little bit, apparently you guys sleep separately at one point. Do you still do?
Uh, so we sleep separately maybe half the time or something like that. Uh, I sleep so much better separately. And it's not her specific; it's just anybody specific. Like I have like a smartwatch that tracks my sleep. Like you can see the difference. And yeah, I found that when we first moved in together, we actually didn't move in together till after we got married, just because of logistics. And I found that like in the first month of being married, like I was really getting annoyed with her, and it wasn't her fault. Like I knew it was my fault. I'm like, wow, she just like came up into my office to like give me water or do something like really sweet, and I'm annoyed with her. Clearly, it's my fault. And I was like trying to figure out what it was, and I realized I was just exhausted, right? And so I was like, hey, I'm going to sleep in the guest room for a night. I just like I think I need sleep, right? And I felt like a different person the next day. And so now and she gets it. She's not like, she's very logical and all that. So now we sleep separate beds about half the time. Ideally, I'd like to have like two twin beds that are like separated by a few inches. I think that's like the ideal situation. But yeah, not yet.
This conversation seems a lot more awkward than one normal the couple conversation seems like. Is it? Do you think it is her as a factor of how this conversation went really well, or do you think it is like how both of you have great communication skills?
Uh, I mean, I think it's both. Like, I think I'm able to present it in a way that like that makes it clear that it's not her, it's me. Because it really is. Like, hey, I sleep better by myself. Sorry, I wish I didn't. It'd be great. So I think I do a good job of communicating that, but I think she also does a good job of like she's confident and secure enough to like receive that information without making it like, oh, he doesn't like sleeping in the same bed. Some girls would be insecure enough to kind of make it into something else. So, I think it's a two-way street, and I think in general we have really good communication.
Like, do you know why you guys have so little arguments as compared to the general statistics of couple? I mean,
Yeah,
on one blog post it says there's only one big one so far, so I don't know if that still stands.
yeah, still only one big one, and even that wasn't like really a big, it was, the big one was about, uh, it was about me spending time with a female friend of mine who she didn't know, and so it's just sort of going into the relationship with different experiences. I have a lot of female friends who were 100% platonic, and I think especially in Chinese culture, she's Chinese. That's like, that's not how it is. Right. And so I think it was sort of like I was so cavalier about it, and she's like, whoa, like what's going on? Uh, so that was sort of our one big argument. I think, I think we both have good communication skills. We're both good at talking stuff through. One thing I give her a tremendous amount of credit for, which I've never really experienced in any other relationship, is that I think she's very good at bringing up small things before they even become like small arguments. I'm trying to think of like what an example would be. Uh, I mean, they're so small they sort of like fade into the background. But she'd be like, "Oh, just have a small thing to bring up, but like once in a while, when like if you're working and this, then I feel this way. And it's like, oh, okay, I didn't realize, I'll just stop doing that. Or like, oh no, that's what this really means. And it's like, okay, no problem anymore. Instead of like festering, I wish I could think of a good real example. So here's one example is whenever I get Amazon packages, I'm excited to get my package. I open it up, get my thing, and sometimes I leave the box lying around. So we actually have two apartments that are next to each other, and we treat them like one apartment. But like I had already had this apartment, so she bought the one next to me, so we kind of have the big one. And typically, we share them, but like I keep mine clean, she keeps her clean, stuff like that. And so I'll leave these boxes all over my apartment and it doesn't bother me. Once a week, I kind of stack them up, I throw them out, and I never thought twice about it because, I got a couple cardboard boxes. It's fine. And so, like, the way she brought it up is she's like, hey, like, I noticed you have all these cardboard boxes around your apartment. Like, it's not a big deal, but it kind of bothers me to just see them sitting there. And I was like, oh, okay, I didn't know that. I was like, how about if I leave them in my office? She's like, yep. Or you can put them by the door and I'll throw them away for you. I'm like, oh, problem solved either way. You know what I mean? Instead of like her feeling uncomfortable in our house and being annoyed and like, well, it's not a big enough deal to bring it up until all of a sudden maybe she's just so pissed off at me it comes out in some other way and we're fighting about something that wasn't even the actual issue. So I think she's really good at bringing stuff like that up and just sort of like is always actually willing to have a solution. So even with that, me being friends with this other girl situation, she was upset and I get it, right? And I remember thinking like, oh, it sucks. This is like one of my closer female friends. Now it's going to be awkward. I can never like they'll never get along. And so in the resolution of it, I was like, look, I won't travel with her again until you're friends with her. All I ask is that, and I won't even be alone with her unless anybody else, unless other people are there, it's fine. All I ask is that you make an effort to become friends with her. And I sort of said that thinking like, she's probably not going to do it. Within a week, they were like best friends. And I was like blown away. I was like, she really was like, she put it aside. She was like, okay, this is my husband's friend. There must be good things about her. Let me get to know her. And now they're friends. So I think almost no women would do that, right? So I give her a tremendous amount of credit.
Yeah, and I think also the way she phrased, hey, this is bothering me. It's not your fault. It's just
Right.
my thing. That helps a lot in terms of communication, and then just willing to have a solution being upfront and being able to sort of be solution orientated and sort of just like throw ideas out there. Maybe this solution is not the one for you, but here's what I think. Then it's way easier, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I always feel like she's trying to find a solution, not trying to like blame me for something I did wrong. And you see a lot of relationships where it's really a lot about one party or the other trying to like, earn points by showing how wrong the other person is, which of course, is toxic to the relationship.
Bad idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you alluded to this two apartments thing, which Derek also brought it up. So, do you want to like just start off there of this Vegas apartment that you have? I guess a couple of questions that I have, like that you can answer together is, well, why Vegas? How do you get like 20? I don't know, is it 20 apartments? At the same time, and you got it at I remember somewhere on the internet it was like 50,000 for an
Yeah.
apartment. I don't know how big this apartment is, but it's right next to the strip. So I think I'll just have you rattle on.
Yes. So I knew that the 2008 housing crash really affected Vegas a lot. And I would go to Vegas, once per month or so to play poker. So I was familiar with Vegas. I liked Vegas. I liked the strip. And I just sort of like, I didn't know numbers, but I was like, oh yeah, Vegas is really cheap. I just sort of knew that in the back of my head. And then this one month, I had this great trip to Vegas. I played poker. I went to the buffet. I had made friends with a local person here and hung out with them. And I was like, man, Vegas is like a fun place to be. And I was like, let me just check out what real estate is like. And it was like far cheaper than I thought it was. Like I knew it was cheap, but I was also coming from San Francisco prices. And so I was like, oh, it's really cheap. And so there were a lot of places for under 100K, a bunch for under 50K. There were some for even like 30K back then. And so I just thought like this is so cheap that I basically can't lose if I buy a place here. Like whether I just use it as like a crash pad for myself when I play poker and save hotel fees, whether I Airbnb it out, whether I don't think I ever thought I'd live there, but I just like it's like my friends could say that it's just like so versatile. There's going to be some way to make that work. So I just bought this place sight unseen. I was actually in Czechoslovakia, or no, I was in Hungary at the time, I think, or maybe Prague. Anyway, one of those Eastern Europe. I just remember like being in front of a big church, like signing the documents on my phone. Like, I guess I'm buying this place. Um, and so I bought this place. It was like 800 square feet. It was under 500,000, under 50,000, and I just bought it. And a month later, I show up, and I remember getting the keys and going into this apartment, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, this is just like, it's the most generic apartment you can imagine. Crappy brown carpet, popcorn on the ceiling, like white, it's just the kitchen was like disgusting, like this weird, like melted plastic kind of countertop, like fixtures, greasy stove from the 60s. And I was like, what am I even doing here? I don't even know. But clearly I needed to renovate it. So I was here and I'm doing all these projects and all this. And in the time that I was renovating it, I got to know Vegas outside of the Strip, and it just fell in love with it. Not so much in the way you fall in love with like a beautiful city like San Francisco, where you're like, wow, this is like a beautiful masterpiece of a city, but more like, wow, I love living here. It's just like, it's so convenient, it's so pleasant. Uh, it's like there's no friction to do anything. The food's great, it's cheap. And yeah, by the time I'd renovated the place for whatever purpose, I lived here essentially. And then in the process, the biggest problem for it was, especially at the time, I felt like San Francisco had the best people in the world in terms of, for me, making friends with people, and Vegas was not as good. And so my solution, being stubborn, I'm like, well, what am I going to do? Thought I'm going to try to move them here. And so now it's a few years later, and we've got 12 of the apartments in our neighborhood. And so, almost nobody's here full time. It's all part time or whatever. But yeah, so now we've got this weird neighborhood in Vegas.
Wait, so is it like a apartment in a building, or it is like houses?
Uh, yeah, they're sort of like connected. It's not like a high rise. It's like low rise, kind of connected. Yeah, almost like townhouse kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cheap. I mean, yeah, ridiculous. I mean, if you come to Singapore, you know how much property price here is.
Yeah, and
Um,
they're not as cheap anymore, but they're still under 100K.
oh, but yeah, that's still pretty cheap. And so how did I guess the wifey and you like have a two separate thing? What was the thinking behind it?
Well, I mean, I really customized my apartment a lot, so I didn't want to move. She was in Houston for school, so she was ready to move anyway. And she would stay with me in my place, but it's a two-bedroom place. One of the bedrooms is converted. It's this room here. It's converted to my office. And so, it's not that big. I'm like, what is she going to do all day? Like, she can't, I need my office to myself. The bedroom's small. It's not like, what's she going to do in there? You can just sit in the bed. Is she really going to just hang out in the living room all day? I don't know. So, uh, the unit next to mine came up for sale, and she likes to invest and stuff like that. I'm like, look, if you don't buy it, I'm going to buy. Like, you should buy this apartment. And Chinese people love buying apartments anyway. All she wants to do is buy apartments. So she was ready for that. So she bought the apartment, and it's cool because she has her own space that can be exactly, I don't cook, she cooks, so her kitchen is exactly how she wants it to be. I don't step foot in there. You know, my office is how I want it to be. Her living room, actually, now she has a better office than me because her living room is now her office. So it's this giant table and a couch and all this. So it's kind of fun. We have our own space, but also common space. I think in the near future we'll probably move into a house. But I think we'll
But there's no
probably
chance of
do.
like combining two together, right? Is there?
uh, we've thought about it. The problem is it's just not that efficient. Like, we have two kitchens. We really don't need two kitchens. Like, we pay two HOA fees, which are relatively high. So it just kind of it doesn't make a lot of sense to go through that. Plus, then how are you ever going to sell it with this weird sort of Frankenstein apartment situation with two kitchens? So and in Vegas, a lot of houses, even in the price range of like, if we just sold our apartments and combined that to buy a house, you might have a pool and stuff like that and garage. So it'd be nice to have stuff like that.
Okay, so I want to dive into this idea of empire housing. And so, how many homes do you own? I think it was like five, the last account or something like
Like
that,
five,
around the
yeah.
world. Budapest, and then there's Tokyo, Vegas. I can't remember what else.
Hawaii, and then we have an island.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, Hawaii and Island. How did this idea came about, and what is Empire Housing? Go right ahead.
So I think the kernel of the idea started way back in I guess it was in college. Is it college or high school? I think it was college. I convinced my friends to buy a school bus with me because I had just seen this movie called Road Trip, and they steal this school bus and they have this awesome road trip in it. And I forget even how it started, but I thought, well, how much is a school bus? Turned out they were very cheap. And my father's a carpenter. I like to build stuff, and so I thought we could build this really cool road trip vehicle. And everybody predicted disaster. I mean, everybody thought this was like the dumbest idea ever, except for my friends. And they're like, you're going to fight about it. It's going to break down. It's going to be all these problems. And it ended up being like one of the best decisions we made. The common ownership was super easy. We all worked on it together. The finances were easy. When the whole thing blew up outside of Vegas, nobody really cared because they only had $500 into it anyway. So I think like somewhere in the back of my head from that, I had this idea that you could like there could be this sum is greater than its parts situation in buying stuff. And so I'd always wanted to buy an island. Since high school, a friend showed me this magazine called Rob Report. It's a magazine for people who wish that they were rich, but it pretends to be a magazine for people who are rich. And in the classifieds, it always had islands for sale. And to me, this really resonated with me. It's like, well, that's the coolest thing. And I've noticed when I talk to people, if I talk to girls, most of them don't care at all. And then guys either think it's the coolest thing they've ever heard of, or they're like, well, that's pointless. Why would you? It's sort of like the girls. So, but for me and some of my friends, it was like, yes, of course, an island is the coolest thing you could ever have. And I'd searched and searched to try to find an affordable one, but you can find some for as cheap as like $30,000, but they're all the way over in like remote islands of the Philippines where you have to like take a flight to Manila, then a regional flight, then you have to hire a float plane, then you have to hire like a native in a canoe to like it's like these ridiculous scenarios. Or you find one in the Caribbean or Maine, but they start at like $500,000. And so I'd sort of given up or like earmarked it like, all right, when I have more money, I'll do it. And then a friend of mine who lives in Japan, he's like, hey, have you ever seen this site, privateislandsonline.com? And he showed it to me. And I was like, dude, I look at this site every month. It's not doable. They're too expensive. They're too far. And he said, oh, that's weird. I thought some of the Canada ones would work. And I realized I'd never checked Canada. And I looked, and sure enough, there were plenty of them like 100,000 or under, a little bit over. And so literally within 2 days, I had an offer in. I stayed up all night. I was at that point aware of every single island that was for sale in the eastern side of Canada. And I got two or three friends who said they were in. And I was like, all right, if I got two or three friends already, for sure I can get 10. I'll just put in an offer and we'll figure it out. And again, people predict, this was on Hacker News when we bought it, and people were predicting it was going to be the biggest disaster and all this. And, some people have never been to the island, or one guy's never been to the island. Some of us go every year, multiple times. Everybody loves that they bought it. So that sort of was like, all right, well, once that worked, I'm like, all right, where else can I buy a place? And so then I got Budapest, and then what came next? I guess Hawaii, and then we just got Tokyo, and now I'm done. Tokyo's the last one.
And you sort of like wrote out a little bit in your book about how this whole thing is being set up. If you could just top level walk through why how did you choose the structure of how you do the finance, and why I think it was somewhere in the Midwest, one of those cities where you can start a LLP there, right? So why that city?
It's just sort of lowest hassle because I know I'm going to be the guy dealing with all of it, and so I'm just trying to make it. And it's a group of people who we all trust each other like 100%. Like if I had to hand off the reins to any member of any of the groups for years, I would, it's fine. So it's sort of like, all right, what's going to let us do this the easiest way, the least hassle? Wyoming is one of the easiest, cheapest places to have an LLC. I think if you have certain lawsuits, it's maybe not the best one, but we'll never have lawsuits. So yeah, it's just an easy structure. It's monthly fees or annual fees. You can choose if you're a member which one you pay. They equal the same amount. And then typically I just decide how it all gets spent. If it's going to be something crazy like a renovation, we have a discussion about it. If it's like we need a new thermostat, I just buy it. Or somebody else just does it. They can tell me, I pay them the money. So yeah, it's very easy. very low overhead.
So basically the idea is that you want to set up a company, and then everybody sort of like have a equal amount of ownership, and then
Yeah.
then you are sort of like the CEO of this company who
Yeah.
decides on what to do with this property, which is sort of like an investment or equipment. How do you expand that? Is that how it is?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if it's true in Singapore or other places. In the US, there's an entity called an LLC, which is just like it's like $50 a year. It's sort of like my cars are owned by LLCs. Everybody has an LLC for everything because it's just it's an easy structure to own stuff in. So I made the mistake in Budapest of trying to get a Hungarian equivalent, which is a KFT, and I regret it to this day. Like every month we have an accountant, we have to pay taxes. It's like this big hassle. So in the US, it's very easy. It's like no effort, no hassle to have an LLC.
So wait, so how is that different from like a private ownership, or like what is the next tier on top of the LLC?
So I guess the next one up would be like a corporation. And fundamentally, if you're not, none of these places make money. We don't, so they're all, you know, if you don't make a profit, there's probably not, you know, if you make a profit with the corporation, maybe there's some more hassle. Uh, I don't know. It's just sort of the easiest one. Like you don't have to have board meetings. You have to file one annual report per year. Uh, it's easy to open a bank account for it. It's just like a very easy way to do it. If the members change, you don't even have to report it because everybody just kind of has a certificate that says they own a percentage. So it's just kind of easy.
Right. So those are the different things that you sort of want to, I guess, to know before. And I guess the ownership, the sole proprietor thing wouldn't work because it's a shared property, and you still kind of want to give everyone like a piece of paper that say, hey, you own this amount and all that, right?
Sort of. I mean, I have all the papers. Nobody's asked me for them, so it's like I don't know if anybody even has them, but I guess some people do. Yeah, I mean, you could do it as like a group ownership thing. Like you can just put all of your names on the title. But then if one person, I guess we had one person switch once. Then if you have somebody switch, you have to get it retitled, or like you probably have to do a bill of sale. You have to do all this stuff. For an LLC, you don't. You just change a record internally, so it's just easy. Yeah.
Well, what is like if like let's say you fall in love with the city, right? How do you start? I guess what is your process of thinking behind it to start sort of looking and and then to like fixing on a place and putting in an offer?
Yeah, so my general formula is like the cheapest place in the best location is that's my goal. And I don't always buy the number one cheapest place or get the number one best location, but like I'm never going to get a bigger place further out, basically, right? My other sort of rule is if I would rather get an Airbnb than stay in my own place, I shouldn't buy my own place, right? So it has to be better than an Airbnb that I would book would be, right? It doesn't have to be better than every Airbnb, but like so for Budapest, for example, there are enough Airbnbs. I don't know if this is still true, but a couple of years ago when I bought the place, there are enough Airbnbs sort of in the $50 to $70 range that's what I'm going to spend on an Airbnb most of the time. If I have a bunch of friends, maybe get a bigger one or whatever. So my criteria was, can I buy a place that's in a better location or at least as good a location as any of those $50 to $70 Airbnbs? And then can I furnish it to a much higher level? So then once I get the place, I furnish all these places to levels that are very ridiculous for their location, right? So like, my apartment in Vegas is in a neighborhood that if you ask a Vegas resident about this area, they'd be like, oh, I wouldn't step foot in that area. They think it's dangerous. But I have a movie theater, I have a sauna, I have my own gym. Like, I so I, the whole thing's automated. I have plants everywhere, all this sort of stuff. So we furnish to a very high level in all the places.
And do you just sort of like go to whatever property guru or one of those listing sites and just start looking at like for areas and all, like, or do you just sort of like, do you visit the area because you actually in your Vegas area, like, you haven't even been to the place and you just put in the offer, or have you actually been to that like apartment itself?
It turns out I actually had been very nearby because one of my favorite restaurants is nearby, but I didn't realize it. I didn't know until after I'd moved. I think about primarily uh, I think primarily about transit time to things I care about, right? So in Japan, I'd actually never been to the neighborhood that we bought our place, but I've spent, I mean, countless months cumulatively, or maybe years in Japan. And so I was like, all right, here's the tea places I go to. Here's where my friends live. Here are my favorite restaurants. And I just made like a spreadsheet for all the neighborhoods I was considering, like what's the transit time, walk plus train. So the formula for Japan essentially is how close can you get to a train station? Because actually walking tends to be a bigger component. If you're 18 minutes from the best train station in Japan, well, you're 18 minutes plus from everywhere. We're we're 4 minutes from not the best station, but a station that's on two of the best lines, pretty close to a lot of the best stuff. So that made it a lot easier to get a cheap place there, but we can get anywhere fast. So in Budapest, I stayed there for a month and a half. I wasn't that familiar with the city, so I was boots on the ground there. Uh, Hawaii, I went once before I bought it because I hadn't been to Hawaii in 20 years. So I thought, let me make sure I still like it. Uh, but even in finding the place, I only looked at one apartment complex because I was like, here's the stuff I know I'm going to want to do. It's the only one that's in a reasonable price range and is close. So either we're buying that or we're not buying.
Do you go via a realtor, or do you just like went straight to the owner and send a letter?
Realtor. For the island, we bought it directly because they had an island, they had a listing on Craigslist. But I think actually, I guess Budapest, they have a weird system where there aren't really realtors, so we went through direct there. So I guess maybe I go direct half the time.
Right, but if you have an opportunity to, you would definitely still stick to the realtor because they know what they're doing and laws and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, typically, I've never had somebody else find it, so I find it 100% of the time myself. And then if locally a realtor can can do all the documents and kind of make it all happen, then I hire them. I don't want to do the documents, so I'd much rather hire a professional who's going to do it right.
You do all the hard work by finding the place, and then they take the commission just by doing the documents, I guess. Then, I mean,
Yeah, because I figure if I tell them like, "Hey, here are the 5 places I want to go. Find me a place that's the closest to this," they don't care. Like, that's not how realtors work because they just have too many people who are wasting their time essentially for them to do that specific of a search for everybody. So, as I do probably with too many things, I'm like, well, I'm the only person who could possibly do this well, so I'll do it myself. But also, all these places I think of them as having them for life. So I think I don't care how much upfront time I put in because I'm going to have this place for life.
because it seems like the search process itself is really like it's time consuming, right? Because you just gotta go like area by area and then like, okay, what's this price, and create this like massive like spreadsheet of like, okay, possibly, and then nailing down sort of an area and then like going full on with the area and then finding like all the different apartments in the area, isn't it?
For sure, yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to talk a little bit about making friends because you seem to have a really interesting and cool group of friends over the years. Would you say that you intentionally developed them over the years?
Yeah, I mean, not all of them. I think, some people you meet by chance. I definitely was totally oblivious to everything, and I still have some great friends from that era. Uh, but I would say, any most friends that I've made in the past 5, 10 years was uh, relatively deliberate process. Yeah.
But how does it look like, of you um, reaching out? I guess how does the first reach out looks like to sort of, I guess the part two will sort of be the cultivation, and then like how do you screen for them and all that? Do you have a process in place and all?
So I'd say I started with screening because what happened was I was working hard on set. I had almost no free time, and I was still going to social things, but sort of realizing I didn't have enough time to follow up with new people, my friends, etc. And so I thought, okay, well, before I could always just hang out with anybody I wanted to all the time. It didn't really matter how well I was using my social time. Now it matters, so I have to be more discerning. So my first step was like, okay, how do I know who I want to spend time with? Like I've got to have a filter up front. And so actually what I did is I looked back at friendships I had made in the past and I thought, who are like the big distinction to me is like, who are the people who I want to spend more time with? Because I have like, a lot of people I'm friendly with who I really like a lot, but maybe I don't really care if it's not important to me that we spend a lot of time together. I care about what happens in their life, but like if we don't become better friends, that's fine, right? I think we all have, people like that. But then I have other people who it's like, man, I really hope that our friendship continues to grow, or like, here's an acquaintance I hope I become even better friends with. And almost like dating, I was like, what are the things that actually matter to me? And for me, uh, it was essentially smart people, ambitious people who are also kind. And there are other things as well, but I found, especially in San Francisco, that was an effective filter because you could meet a lot of ambitious people, but a lot of them weren't really kind people, that would do things that were sort of against their best interest if it was the right thing to do. I guess that was sort of my definition. And then there were also a lot of kind people, but sort of in that hippie sort of like, I hope the best for everybody, but not really doing much with their lives, right? And so I found that a lot of my favorite people were kind of at that intersection. And so basically I was like, okay, who do I already know who are maybe acquaintances, who are kind, ambitious people who maybe there's not a specific reason, but I would like to become better friends with them. And I would proactively make time for them. And then there were other people who maybe were even kind, ambitious people, or maybe weren't both of them. But I was like, I don't actually care if I become better friends with them. In fact, sometimes I realize like I kind of just want to be friends with this person because I think it's like good for my like career because they're like a famous person or something. And I was like, I'm just going to stop being friends with them or stop putting effort in, right? Because it's just didn't feel good. And so just having that filter, I think, was 90% of it, where it just made it very clear, like, here are the people I should be spending time with. Here are the people, if they're around, that's great. But if they're not, I'm not going to make an effort. And then the other thing I thought is like, okay, if I have limited time, I better be pretty proactive about this. I can't just like see what happens. Sort of like dating, you have to be proactive. So even though I'm sort of naturally an introvert, maybe now I'm more in the middle, but naturally I'm an introvert. I thought, okay, I'm going to be the guy who is going to be the hub of this friend group. Not because I want the importance of being the hub or whatever, but because it's a service I can provide for everybody that makes me even more valuable to them. And something I learned along the way is that probably the most valuable service you can provide as a friend is helping your friend foster a friendship with somebody else, right? That's a really good friend for them. And so if you're the hub, you have a lot of ways to do that. So that's sort of my general formula.
What is the boots on the ground tactical stuff, right? So I guess before then you didn't have a big castle or an island or whatnot, and I guess not everyone have an island.
My friends almost never come to the island. It's weird.
Oh, so yeah. But what are the other aspects of how does a hub look like or could feel like?
Yeah, so whenever I'm trying to come up with a plan, what I want to do is come up with a plan that is like definitely going to succeed if I do it, right? So that way, if it doesn't succeed, I know I didn't do it well enough, and if I'm doing the process, I know for sure it's going to succeed. Can't do it in every situation. I probably can't come up with a plan that will get me into the NBA, for example, right? But clearly, I'm capable of having friends. So like, okay, what's the plan for that? And so I want to make it easy and repeatable. And so for friends, the easiest way to start is have a weekly gathering that you can invite people to. It's best if you already have one friend, and that's how I did it. So I had my friend Todd, one of my best friends from forever. And every Sunday, I don't even know why we did this. Every Sunday we went to our favorite burger place in San Francisco. He was also the one I worked on set with, so I think maybe that was part of it. So we would take a break every Sunday night. Exactly. And so what we did is we just started inviting other people every Sunday. So I sort of had these friends that were sort of in another friend group that I was part of. And I thought, I'm just going to invite the ones that I like every Sunday. And it's going to be like a very low pressure invitation. If they want to come, they come. If they don't, they don't. And they're going to know it's a standing invitation. So just every Sunday, I'm like, hey, as always, we're going to Rome. That's the name of the place, Rome Burger. If you can come, come. If you can't, maybe we'll see you next week. And pretty quickly, another couple started coming a lot. So there were 4 of us that always came. And then that made it really fun because, of course, you're all looking forward to seeing each other. And then they would start bringing some of their friends. We bring our friends. And so now this friend group, I haven't been in San Francisco in years now. And that friend group still meets all the time, right? And some of them wouldn't be friends if I wasn't there. Probably some of them would have been. And anytime I go to San Francisco, most importantly, I have an amazing friend group to be a part of.
To this, I guess, is this still the burger place, or they have like moved on to sushi now?
We still go to the burger place.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. And anybody can do that, right? It's so easy. It's like you don't have to cook. Just pick a place you like, weekly invitation, find one person who wants to do it with you. How hard is it to find another person that wants to make friends? It's so easy, so just find one other and do it.
And I think, I mean, Nick is coming out with his new book,
Yeah.
nickgray.net, hosting parties, so we can look forward to that. Uh,
Yeah.
and and also, I guess, whatever your interest is, it could be reading a book, or so a book club,
Right. For sure.
documentary night, and anyone wants to do, just make it a routine, have one more person, and then
Yeah.
get going.
Yeah.
Now that you're away from these places, for friends who are not in the place you are living in, well, how do you keep nurture or cultivate or keep up with these relationships?
Yeah. It can be hard. And I also don't, I think I do an okay job of it, but I don't think I'm necessarily the best at it. But I guess my typical thing I do is I try to invite as many of those friends to on as many trips as I can. So if I'm in Budapest, hey, come to Budapest. If I'm in Hawaii, come to Hawaii. Or if they're going on a trip, I'll join them as well. Um, I find that for me, it's different for everybody, but I think most of my friendships have developed the most on trips, especially maybe smaller group trips, few people on a trip. So I just try to maximize those. I try to stay in touch on, WhatsApp and all that. I'm not the best at that. I try to send emails once in a while, just check up on people. Some friends and I now, actually, that group that used to go to Rome Burger, now we do weekly games online. So tomorrow night we'll do that. Uh, yeah, so I try to keep up as much as I can. I think essentially for me, most of my friends are nomadic kind of people. So all of us are at least okay at keeping up with people remotely. Like if any of us drops off, like if I just never sent anything outgoing, I'm probably going to hear from all of those people once or twice per year. You know what I mean? And vice versa. And so I think when you're a nomad, you essentially just get a big enough friend group eventually that you always have some social contact throughout the week because there's enough of them and enough of them stay in touch.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk about giving advice because you're sort of like this expert advice giver. I guess throughout the years you've become better at it. Uh,
Yeah.
let's start off with mistakes that people make in giving advice, and then let's move on into how does a good advice look and feel like, and what's the point? I guess what's the end goal of a good advice?
Right. So I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is they give advice that's good for them but not for the other person. Right? Like uh even when I like and I think I've been as guilty of this as anybody else, but like when I got into pickup, it was such a revolution for me that I went to every guy and I'm like, you've got to do this, you've got to do this. And then when they didn't do it, I was like annoyed with them. I'm like, guys, this is so important. Why aren't you doing it? And only like with some level of maturity did I look back and realize like actually for some of them it probably was the right thing. For some it really wasn't. And if I push too hard on it and it's not the right thing for them, they're probably not going to take my advice next time either, right? So I think a lot of people are thinking about their own situation more than the other person's situation when they're giving advice. So I think that's a big mistake. I also think something I've learned a lot through coaching and events in particular is that there's no point in giving advice, even if it's the correct advice, if you know the other person will not do it, right? Like I would actually rather give somebody something that's 80% good advice that I know they're going to do than 100% good advice that they're probably not going to do. Here's a good example. So I had somebody who had plenty of money, had a lot of money saved up, like hundreds of thousands of dollars saved up, hated his job, and wanted to start his own business, right? So clearly, like the right thing for me, I don't know if this is an exact example, but more or less, this is a sort of maybe a half made up one. So clearly, it's like quit your job, start your business. But he had an emotional attachment to the job. He felt he wasn't secure if he was burning through his savings. A lot of people feel that way, right? And so I would actually rather tell him, okay, do the bare minimum at the job, get done what you have to do, and then you're going to work on your side business for this amount of hours per day, and then hoping that he eventually will grow it up to where he'll quit the business. If he's not like, there's no point in me telling you have to quit the business, you have to quit the business if I know he's not going to. If I think they might, I'll push that side. But once I realize there's no way they're going to do it, you sort of get to know that look or that tone of voice. I switch gears. Yeah.
How does that feel like sound like, I guess?
So typically people will be listening. It's more that you see that they're listening but not processing anymore. I mean, there's probably a lot of small cues, but I think that's the first one that comes to mind. Is at first you're giving advice and they're really into it because they want advice from you, and then you realize that they're like, okay, yep, 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 and you're like, oh, you're not going to do this. It's just I don't know. I mean, I've probably just been in that situation enough times now. Also, especially with I do a monthly phone coaching with a lot of people, and so I actually get to see whether they've done it or not. And so I think I've become much better at predicting whether someone's going to do something or not.
And I guess phone coaching is you can't even see them, so the cues are even way lesser, right? So do you have any verbal check-ins to know if they are gonna do it, or you should switch gear to give some easier quote unquote advice?
Yeah, I think you can just sort of tell, you can sort of tell how they're feeling, if they're feeling frustrated or if they're feeling excited about it. I mean, I think honestly, it's a lot of the same skills I learned in pickup, where you can really understand where someone is in the conversation mentally and emotionally, which is a skill I had zero of prior to that. And so even in coaching, like I think I have a better idea of why people are saying what they're saying or why they're saying it in the tone that they're saying it in.
This is a lot of contextual information, and one wouldn't know what we're talking about unless one really goes into the deep end of the pool and give a lot of advice and have a lot of people not following it, and then oh, okay,
For sure. Yeah. I mean, when I first started, I think my success rate so one of the ways I judge myself is on the first call, I'm going to give somebody some assignments, 1 to maybe 5 maximum. And then we're going to see if they did them in the first month. And I always, from the very beginning, I try to scale it so that they're going to do it. I don't want to give them 5 impossible things. In the beginning, I would say that maybe 10 or 20% of people would actually do everything they said they were going to do. In my most recent batch, every single person did everything they said they were going to do. And my last in-person coaching thing, we did a 1.5 month or no 3 month follow-up. Everybody did everything they said they were going to do. And so it's really something I've improved on a lot.
Give advice for the other person, not for you. Give advice in smaller chunks if they're not excited, and look for cues. Any other misconception and things people should look out for?
I think also make sure somebody has actually asked, either make sure they've asked you for advice, or I'd say there's 5 to 10 people in my life who, whether we've expressed it or not, there's a clear understanding that we can give advice, even harsh critical advice at any time, and it's going to be well received. So maybe you have people like that in your life. I think maybe most people might have somebody in their life like that at least. So I think, but there's nothing more annoying than when you meet some new person at a party or something and they start giving you. I remember I met this guy on a cruise. He randomly sat at our table. And he's like, oh, you have a cruise business. That's really interesting. Well, here's some things I would do. I'm like, I don't care. You don't know anything about the cruise business. This is your first cruise. Irrelevant, right? And I hated this guy because of this, because he spent an hour trying to give me cruise advice, and I'm very politely trying to shut it down and change the topic. So make sure that somebody has asked for advice, or it's somebody you have that kind of relationship where it's known that you share advice like that.
So basically, by default, do not give advice until the person expressed interest. You can ask them if you want advice because you have prior experience, but make sure you have give them a super easy out.
Yeah, and the first step of giving advice too is understanding the other person. I think it's very easy, especially when like I said, people give advice for themselves more than other people sometimes. So you can just ask them questions to understand their position more, and often that'll lead naturally to giving advice. You're like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I was in a similar position. Like, oh, what'd you do? Now you're in that mode.
Okay, cool. So one of the advice you give is to instead of going to school, you tell people. I mean, it's one of the things among many things that you given us for people to go learn to play poker. And by playing poker, you actually get to earn $60 an hour. In my mind, I can't fathom that. But maybe it requires some explanation. What are you thinking when you say that?
Well, so I haven't. I think I haven't played a hand of poker in 3 or 4 years, maybe 3 years. So caveat that my advice might be outdated, but I kind of don't think it is. I think the big principle is that I think school is massively obsolete at this point. I think it's especially given the value. If school was free, I could see the argument for many of the people going to school now to continue to go. I don't think it's worthless or anything. But given the cost of school, I think it's a tremendously poor value for, yeah, I don't know the stats, but I guess at least half or more of people who go. And I think for sure there's a better path for a lot of people, in particular people who tend to read my stuff, people who are a little more independent, a little more self motivated. So I gave poker in the post you're talking about, I gave poker as an example because it's something that any smart person can start with, teach themselves, or even they can hire people for far less than school, and their earning potential is immediately higher, right? Just to sort of illustrate that there are better examples than college. And so in that post, I think it was called Hustler's MBA, I just sort of wrote a list of like, if you do these 5 things, it's much cheaper than school, it'll take less time, and your outcome is going to be better. But there's actually, I don't think many, my goal isn't for people to do exactly that. It's for people to come up with their own thing rather than just do what everybody else does.
What is the 80/20 there, for if someone say, hey, I saw that Hustle MBA, I really want to learn this poker thing, how will you give them advice?
Yeah, so it's a lot easier than dating. So uh, I play a game called Limit Hold'em, which is like No Limit but slightly different strategy. I don't know that it's the best. I don't know enough about all the current pokers available to know that it's the best thing to learn. So it may not be. It's certainly a dying game of poker that you can't play in a lot of places. So I always played in person. I've played very little online. If you want to play Limit Hold'em, a good player can make 1.5 to 2 times the size of the big blind. So, there's 10, 20, 15, 30, 20, 40, 30, 60, 40, 80. Those are all common denominations of poker. So in any of those, you could make 1.5 to 2 times the bigger number there. So the place to start is a book called Winning Low Limit Hold'em by a guy named Lee Jones. Fantastic book. That's how my friends and I all learned. Um, if once you read that, you should read Small Stakes Hold'em. I think it's by Sklansky. Uh, if you just read and comprehend and internalize those 2 books, they're both kind of like beginner books. If you just learn those, at least based on last time I played poker, you will be a winning poker player. You'll, and my friends and that's the path we all took. We had tracking things on our phone, so you could see that curve of like, I'm losing, I'm leveling off. Now I make money every time. Not every time, but every month or so. So yeah, so it's pretty easy. You just do those 2 books.
And so, like, what is the amount like a person should set out, a financial amount to I just level the playing curve. That's a dip, right? And then the time, I guess.
Could be different for everybody. When I first started tracking, I had some background in poker, like I knew how to play, but I hadn't played in 10 years. Um, and I played every night, so I was like, I was into it. I was spending time. I think maybe at my lowest, I was down a few $1,000, and maybe after a month and a half, 2 months, I was making money. I think for some other friends who didn't have a poker background, it took a little longer, but maybe also the dip was about the same, I would say. Maybe they stayed in the dip a little longer. I don't know.
5,000, would you say, is a good time and a good amount?
I'd say, yeah. I mean, again, this is sort of outdated information, but that's my recollection.
You write for a long, long time. What does writing means to you these days? And why do you still write?
Yeah. Well, now, I mean, the honest answer is because I've been writing for 15 years or 18 years. I don't even know how long it is. So I can't keep, I probably at this point cannot ever quit my blog. Um, I also feel like, for one, I've benefited tremendously from my blog in countless ways. So part of it is I'd like to continue to benefit from my blog, and then the other part is I feel a debt of gratitude. A lot of my readers have been reading for 10 years, 5 years, 15 years. So, uh, I care about their success and care about sharing. Who doesn't want to share stuff with people who appreciate it? So, so I benefit that way. I might be done writing books. I feel like at this point, the cost benefit of writing books, especially in terms of like how many new things I'm dying to write, has gone to where it's no longer at the top of my list. But I've also kind of thought that before and written more books, so who knows? Uh, yeah, so I'd say that's where I'm at with writing. I like writing. I think it's a really valuable skill for almost anybody to have. Um, it helps me compose my thoughts. It helps me think things through a little bit more thoroughly because I know they're going to be subject to at least some scrutiny. Yeah. Also, I like just knowing I have to write. It makes me think, like, makes me look for interesting things in life and thoughts. So that's valuable to me.
What is the benefits of writing books actually? Now that, I mean, you have a blog and you write weekly, right?
Yeah, for books, I mean, for a time it was really good for me financially because it allowed me a lot of years of living, like even if I only made 1,000 to 3,000 for, average per month for a few years, that was enough for me to live in my RV. And so it was cool that I could front load all the effort and then just not worry about money for years. So financially that was good. For me mentally, I just felt like, especially with like the habit book and the social skills book, I just had so many thoughts about it and I could never get in that much depth in blogging. And so it was almost cathartic to like write my big outline for my book, get it all in one place, find the connections between things that maybe I hadn't realized before, and just to sort of get it out. So if people are like, hey, what should I do with social skills? I'm like, funny you asked. Here's every single thing I know about it. Uh, so I guess part of why I don't have any books planned now is I don't have any topics that are like that for me right now.
Right. And it seems like you write a lot, but I don't see you recommending books. So do you read much?
Not like I used to. I used to read. I basically had a couple years where I read. I think one year I read 100 books in a year. The next year I read 70 books in a year, and they were all books that were really highly recommended to me. So they were like excellent books, and a lot of them were from Derek Sivers' book list. He has like I've read almost so many of the books on his list, the high rated ones, and it kind of ruined reading for me because I had like 2 years of reading 10 out of 10 books, and since then I've really struggled to consistently find great books. So I have like on my Kindle I have so many books that are like a third of the way through, 50% of the way through that I'm like, yeah. So I read most days or every week I would say, but I'm not churning through books like I used to. Yeah.
And so, like right now, you just picked up like 3D printing, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I wonder if this question is split two ways or it's like the same question altogether, which is how do you choose project or how do you choose obsessions?
I think I don't choose either of them at all. Yeah, they're the same, and I think I don't. I think I give myself a very wide latitude to just do whatever I want to do. And part of that is that like I've trained myself to not want to play video games and eat jelly beans. You know what I mean? Like if that's what I want to do all day, I would change what my rules were for myself. But through many years of like self-improvement and discipline and all that, I really only enjoy doing things that are good for me to do essentially or mostly, good for me to do. So, for example, if I'm going to learn 3D printing, it's not like, oh, I'm going to start a business that requires 3D printing. But I'm like, okay, if I learn this, I'm going to have to learn how to do 3D CAD modeling. That's interesting, probably applicable to other stuff, probably enjoy it. I'll learn about it's the first time I've made anything physical other than carpentry. So like there's enough good stuff that like I know it's probably going to be beneficial. And even if it's not, okay, I'm under quarantine. Like there's a reason I didn't let myself do it till I was under quarantine. You know what I mean? So it's like my bar has definitely lowered for quarantine of like what's going to be a good use of time. Also because I have months, like I'm not going to become an expert in 3D printing in a week, but in a few months I could. At this point I probably am. I've reprinted my entire printer essentially. So
Wait, did you really?
I mean that's it's one of the jokes in 3D printing is that like you spend about 5% of your time printing stuff and 95% of your time upgrading your printer, and that's been true for me. Yeah. So I think a lot of people in general are more hesitant to go down these rabbit holes because they think it has to make some sort of sense. I don't think about it at all, really. I just think like I'm interested. It's not a complete waste of time. Let's see where it goes, and I'll trust myself to course correct.
Well, I think also like your mindset is very different because like you have sort of gained enough financial that you think like you ever need in your life, right? So then you're not trading time for money anymore. You have sort of like this other way of thinking about time. And one of the questions I have, which is a lot of people have come to this sort of life stage, is that they hit this point where they're like, oh, I think I have enough money. Like, what the fuck? Do you went through that? And what you know how walk me through the emotional journey when you hit that stage or realize you hit that.
Yeah, I mean, I I think the difference is I felt that way before I had any money. Once I knew that I had enough skills that I could always support myself, I had enough money. I mean, I wanted more money then, I want more money now, right? It's like it's a complicated relationship, but I mean, sometime in high school I felt like I had enough. You know what I mean? So, I do see people who they hit a certain amount and they're like, "Great, I can retire." And it's this abrupt change. For me, it wasn't really like that. So, I remember very early on realizing, I mean, probably high school or somewhere around there, realizing I would rather be homeless than have a real job. And I specifically, this is when I guess I know when it was. It was in 1998. I went to Hawaii for the first time. I saw people camping on the beach, which I didn't realize at the time. It's only if you're Hawaiian you're allowed to do it, but I thought everybody was allowed to do it. And I thought, all right, well, if I make $0 and I'm totally homeless, I'll somehow find a way to fly to Hawaii and I'll live on the beach. I would rather do that than do some crappy like file papers for an insurance company or something job. So, like, I knew what I wanted very young, and that made it easy to where like I was like, okay, well, I have enough because I'm not at a job. Like, to me, it wasn't do I have enough money? It's like I have enough because I have enough control over my time. So I was just playing by sort of different rules or different standards pretty young. As I've made more money, it's you know it's changed to where like okay now, I mean my wife works, but like I'm like okay now I could support my wife if I needed to. Everything I do that makes money could stop making money, and I could not make more money, and I would still be fine. Like my lifestyle is now like a zillion times cooler than it was back then, and I could maintain that with no money. So for sure, like there's been other waypoints, but I think those waypoints matter a lot less than the first one you have where you realize like I'm done. Like I got it. I've got everything I need in life. I'm good.
Okay, I think when a lot of people hit that point is like an abrupt a thing, right? Um, and one of the big questions people ask is, well, like, what the hell do I do? you know, and they start going out this like deep rabbit holes. And one of the rabbit holes is, oh, what is the meaning of life? How do you think about that question? And do you even think
I don't.
of it at all?
I just don't care what the meaning of life is to be like. It just it to me. It's an irrelevant question. It's like, is there a meaning of life? Is it knowable by us? Probably not, but maybe. You know what I mean? Like maybe. But what we know for sure is that we have life. We're here. Just from sitting in a chair in a room, you can derive infinite pleasure, essentially, right? Just within your own mind, thinking about the how incredible life is. So if that's where you're starting, why do you need a meaning to life? Yeah, I don't know. I've never felt like I needed a meaning to life. I think I just love life so much. That's enough for me.
Fair, fair.
Yeah.
And I don't I want to dig in a little bit more because you're also good at giving advice, right? Some of your friends who sort of hit that um place abruptly, I guess. Like, what kind of stuff do you think they go through, and what sort of advice you would come to you? Hey, Tynan, like you seem to be living this great life. I'm like, kind of like done with business. Like, how should I think about it? I'm just sort of like swirling in emotions, or like I don't know what I'm like swimming in. How do I orientate myself? What do you tell them?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people, I don't know, a lot of people get their value or their self-worth from the money they make and their career, right? If you ask somebody, tell me about yourself, they talk about their career first. And basically everything anybody does is try to signal how much money they have. You know what I mean? So these are like fundamental pieces, or at least men typically, but fundamental pieces of who people are. And I think once those things become irrelevant, people feel like they lose their relevancy and they don't know who they are anymore. I also think as a society, we think it's bad to be bored, or we think you know, it's bad to kind of be in this position where you're in a vacuum, you don't know what to do next, and it seems like you're doing something wrong. Especially if you're a high achiever, you've probably been told like, "Hey, don't sit around, work, do something, make more." So I think it's a big shift, and I don't know that there's an easy way to make that shift. sometimes, if you shift from gear 10 to gear 1, it's going to be abrupt. You're going to jolt the car or the truck. So I think the number one thing people need to do is just allow themselves to get bored, allow themselves the freedom to waste time, which probably isn't really wasting time anyway. And, don't think about the meaning of life. Think about what's important to you, whether it's saving the dolphins, whether it's your family, whether it's, learning, it could be whether it's learning to make the best, snow cone, like it could be anything. I actually think what makes this world great is that so many people have so many different priorities. I don't think there should be a meaning of life that we're all going for. I love that some guy's most important thing in life is making a replica of a Pan Am 747 in his basement. That's my worst nightmare. I would hate to do that, but I'm really glad that he does it because it adds to the diversity of experience in the world. So I think people need to give themselves, especially when you've been on that narrow track of achievement and success, I think you need to give yourself some latitude and not judge yourself for years, probably 3 to 5 years.
Wow. Cool. All right. We're going to dive into some quick question. The answer doesn't need to be quick. It's just a standard bunch of questions I've asked.
Right.
What are the best gift that you have received or have you given someone the last 5 years?
Wow. I would say maybe it's a kind of boring answer, but my friends and I, all being sort of nomadic, don't tend to have a lot of stuff, or so we don't give each other stuff, or but we always give each other great tea when we go to like a tea city or a new tea house. We always bring each other tea, and so some of my friends have given me just like amazing tea, and I enjoy that.
Favorite tea house in the world?
Oh, good one. Jiao Zhou in Budapest. I love that tea. It's the number one perfect place to me.
Okay. Well, 5 tools that you have bought recently that you really love.
Oh, okay. So 3D printer for sure is one.
What is the model and?
So I don't know that it's the right one to buy. It's a
No, it's just the one that you bought.
Maker Ultimate. I think probably Creality is the right one. I didn't want to do the research. I was like, I know nothing, so any of them is going to be good for me. It actually is a pretty good one. But I'll tell you another item I got. It just happens to be in front of me is a decent quality caliper, digital caliper for measuring stuff for 3D printing. I love this thing. At first, I bought the cheapest, crappiest one, and then it was like annoying enough to use that I bought this good one, and now I totally love it.
What brand is it?
I think it's just like probably some Chinese knockoff. It's Satyrich, Sattiyyrch. The key is that it does hundredths of millimeters and it's metal, and it has this little roller thing up here so that you can adjust very small amounts. It's really making my life. It's making my life very easy. What other tools have I bought recently? Oh, I bought. Are they around here somewhere? No. I bought scrub brushes that attach to a power drill. So for like cleaning, I got it to clean our boat, but I'm going to use it for the bathtub and all this other stuff. I think those are the 3 I can think of off the top of my head.
Like sandpaper to sand stuff, but it's like a brush, so you could like hard clean your floor or your boat.
Exactly.
That's a good idea.
I really hate cleaning, so I like anything that makes it easier for me to clean.
Another thing to use for your cleaning tool is that some people use that for massage.
I just tried that for the first time. I don't like massages, so it does nothing for me. Yeah, it just felt like I was getting sanded.
Favorite movie or documentary in the last 3 years?
I watch almost no movies, and I really don't even watch very many documentaries. Yeah, I don't have one. Sorry.
Okay. Most underrated, any underrated bloggers that you recommend that should have more recognition?
I don't read many bloggers. I don't know. I just don't read much, to be honest. Like I read whatever's on Hacker News or Reddit. I don't know. I feel like it's kind of I'm kind of a hypocrite, but I feel like a lot of my favorite bloggers don't write anymore or don't write like they used to. Yeah.
Worst advice that you see or hear being dispensed in your world?
I feel like there's a lot of different stock advice that people have these days. I ignore all of it, but I feel like these days all my friends have some opinion on whether you should be buying into the market or selling. Yeah, a lot of that.
Oh, why are they bad for you?
Well, I just feel like no, I tend to believe that the stock market is accurately priced, and so I don't think anybody knows any more than anybody else, basically.
Okay, if you can go back in time and have 30 seconds with your 20-year-old self and 30-year-old self, right? Um, what would you tell him and place us where you're at and when you're 20 and 30?
Probably a boring answer, but I don't think I would do it. I think, I mean, depends. I just think my life is so good right now that it's a product of things I've done well, but it's also a product of things I've done poorly. And so while I could think of things that I would tell my like, hey, buy Bitcoin, like you can tell there's some obvious things like that. Maybe that would have changed my life, in a worse way. So given how happy I am with my life, I think I wouldn't change anything. But it doesn't mean it couldn't be better. I just wouldn't take the risk.
3 pieces of advice for people who want to be happy.
There's really only one, which is just be happy. I think everybody's always looking for something to make them happy. And in my experience, it just like social skills. It's something most people don't think that you can learn, but you can learn to make yourself happy. And the majority of it is just how you perceive the world. In any given day, in any month, there's enough in your day to either make you ridiculously happy or ridiculously depressed. Even just see how people react to the coronavirus stuff. You could see I know people who are thrilled because they get to, they're taking advantage of it. Not thrilled that people are dying, but they're taking advantage of the situation. The free time and reconnecting, whatever. And then there's other people who are miserable and think the world's going to end. So I think that people are always looking for something to make themselves happy versus learning the skills to make themselves happy at all times.
Got it. When you think of the word successful, who came into your mind and why?
I guess I don't. Derek Sivers sort of came into my mind. I guess the axe from the show Billions came into my mind. I don't know. I think you can dice it up a lot of different ways. I mean, I would consider basically all of my friends successful on, some metric, if not many metrics.
But why is that so?
I think for me, success is somebody who wins according to their own goals, right? So I think that's why I sort of can think of many like disparate versions of success, right? Like I don't know if you watch Billions, but the guy in it is basically only successful in the financial way. Almost everything else is not good for him. So yeah, but he's succeeded because he got what he wanted. So I like when people have succeeded according to their own goals, and I think that those are the kind of people I tend to make friends with too. So yeah,
Yeah, and by default, they're happy because they're achieving their own goals that they set up for.
exactly. And very often when you're trying to achieve other people's goals or society's goals, you're you're at least starting off unhappy by default. It's a hurdle you have to overcome. So.
Two more questions. Any routines or habits that you find important, morning or evening routines?
For me, drinking tea every morning is important. I mean, I think it is. Maybe if I took it out, everything would be just exactly the same. I don't know. I think a lot of my take on a lot of this stuff is you do a lot of healthy habits, and in the end, you feel great, and you're not really sure which ones, if any, really mattered. So, uh, I like to think that tea matters. I like to think that working out every other day matters. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I eat the same thing every single day. That definitely matters because it gives me so much free time and I don't have to think about it. So I like that. I just started doing sauna every day. Jury's out on that one, but other people tell me that matters. So I guess we'll find out.
Okay. Um, what any upcoming projects that people can look forward to? And then I guess we'll end off with the places where you can find you on the internet.
Uh, yeah, so maybe some projects coming up. I've got a couple ideas of quarantine projects. I'm exploring a few things that I'm not telling anybody yet, uh, but I've got some things coming up.
Okay. And I guess lastly, Twitter, Tynan.com, your website, anywhere else that you want people to check you out.
Yeah, mainly just Tynan.com. And then yeah, Instagram is at TynanCom, I think.
All right, man. Look, thank you so much for your time. This is the end of that.
Sure thing, man. Happy to do it.